Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live episode of To the Moon, Allison, where we talk about the top and trending works in science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction, and romance. I'm your host, Allison Martine Hubbard, author of the Bourbon Books and works of speculative fiction. I am so honored to be joined today by James Rollins, author of, I've known him as like an action sci-fi author for years, but he has a secret fantasy life and he's now letting us all into it. So James, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Allison. I appreciate it very much.
Well, and I really kind of wanted to address you as Dr. Jim, not just because it's kind of fun to call you that, but also because anybody who doesn't know, James Rollins is also a veterinarian. And the reason I bring this up right at the outside is this book is fantastic. And I say that as an animal lover, as someone who pretends to be a biologist, but is not, because I really just loved the fact that this book, and I want you to tell us all about it, how grounded it is in the creature department. And I probably shouldn't start with that, but that's kind of where it hits me in my heart. So can you tell us a little bit about the Starless Crown and the Moonfall Saga?
Well, just to give you the elevator pitch for the novel, it's the story starts untold millennia ago, lost in the depths of time. The world of the story stopped spinning. It ended up with one side facing the sun continually, one side facing darkness continually. It's called a tidally locked planet. And of course, when this happened, major cataclysm, humanity is in ruins. The survivors flee to the only habitable area of the planet, which is sort of the ring, the twilight lands between the burning sun and the freezing cold. And that's where the story starts. It's now millennia later. They don't even remember when this planet was spinning. To them, this is just the way it's always been. And the story starts when a near blind orphan girl has a vision of the moon crashing to the planet and destroying all life.
Moonfall!
Yeah, exactly. Moonfall, which not related to the current movie that was out there, but
No.
Just exactly. Consider that maybe like when the past. Anyway, so she her prophecy is not welcome at this time because the world's at the cusp of war. No one wants to hear prophecies of doom, so it's up to her and sort of a unlikely band of allies. There's a broken knight, an irascible thief, a bronze figure that can move, that sort of have to all help her. A, is this prophecy true? And B, if so, how, in this society that is not very technologically advanced, how do you stop the moon from crashing into the planet? So that begins the big quest that it's going to extend over the 4-book series.
Okay, so it's a 4-book series.
It is indeed.
Okay, I think we always have it in our heads when it's a saga or it's a series, it's 3 because like 3 is a magic number, but you already have, if it is 4, are they all done already or you at least have them mapped out?
I got the second book just about done. Just about to ship it off to my editor. But I have a rough outline of what's going to happen in book 3. I know the big tent poles that hold the story. I know where each book ends. Because I like to structure so that each book has a little bit of a conclusion. Obviously there's more stories still to go, but I want some major accomplishment to have happened in each book, and so I know what that's going to be for book 2, 3, and then of course the climax in book 4. So it's all somewhat structured.
No, and I love that you do that because I have read books where they basically just sliced the book into smaller sections and there's no resolution. And this one had it. So it wasn't like you read this knowing, okay, well, nothing's going to get fixed or solved. There's not going to be progress made. But this one definitely it felt like a complete book, even though we know there's still so much to come. So as a reader, I appreciate that.
And that's when I've ever read series, I appreciate that too. I always get frustrated, especially when there's, 2, 3, 4 years between volumes of a story.
We hate waiting.
Exactly. And when the story is that episodic, where you're not really getting any satisfaction, it gets more and more frustrating as you progress through the series.
Well, and definitely as a reader, especially knowing going in, you even say in the introduction, okay, this is part of a saga. So we at least have that primed in our head that we aren't going to get the complete story of the entire world in this one episode. And I do know, for me personally, like my worst nightmare is picking up a book that I don't know is part of a series, and you get to the end and there's no resolution, nothing. And then you're going, is the next book at least out? And then you've got to go chase it down and can't get past it. So that's like my personal pet peeve. That's just me. But Getting back to the animals in here, can we just talk about your fantastic? Can I show the picture? Do you mind?
Of course you can.
Okay, so
I would love you to.
Okay, just so people know, most people probably already know because I talk about this all the time. I am an audiobook listener because I have no attention span and I love being talked to like a bedtime story. So this is massive and it's amazing. And if you would like, you look at this and go, that's a lot. Just listen to it and it'll be amazing as much as you want. But you know what? You really need this too because the audio doesn't come with pictures like the mirror bat. So anybody, am I showing the mirror bat? I am. Okay,
Yep.
so anybody who saw some of my pictures going, why the heck are you stuck inside a bat at the safari park? Honestly, I never thought that picture would be relevant to anything, but I'm like, I'm a mirror bat because I think I'm about that big. Like they're huge. They're not like
Yes, they are indeed.
Sweet fruit bats. These are massive,
massive apex predators of this
yes.
the swamplands of this world.
Well, and this
So
is one
again,
of the things I really loved because, okay, you're a veterinarian. I have read so many science fiction novels or watched movies where seriously the creature designers just start sticking limbs and wings and scales on things and go, that looks cool. And don't get me started. We've had so many discussions among the nerd types about how do things like banthas live on places like Tatooine where, hi, you're a big furry animal. What are you doing this doesn't make any sense that you live in the desert. Come on. So just as a nerd, I really appreciate, especially as someone who pretends to be a biological student here, that these animals, they made sense. They weren't animals we necessarily knew because this is a world beyond ours, but they were all logical and grounded. And you just did so much. I don't know if you researched these things or you just already knew and had these in your head because this book was 10 years in the making. 10?
I say 10, but it's actually probably more like 8. I actually pulled up when I said 10 initially, and I was like, when did let's research, Jim. And so I pulled up my email that I had sent to my agents when I had this idea for this concept of setting a fantasy on a tidally locked planet. And I looked at the date, and it was actually about 8 years ago. Well, 8 years from the time the book was published, so now it's a little bit past 8 years.
Yeah.
And because I pitched it to him, but didn't know if there was a story there for sure. I had a lot of questions in my own head. I thought, well, I had read in the New Scientist an article about tidally locked planets. Our moon, for those is a tidally locked satellite that orbits our planet with one side forever facing it and one side not. With the dark side of the moon, the bright side.
Yes. It's not just an album, it's a thing.
Exactly. And there's planets and many tidally locked planets across the universe. And but I was wondering, can life exist on such a planet in such extremes? And so I talked to an astrophysicist. I said, could you find life on a tidally locked planet? And they said, well, yeah, actually, yes, because of the thermodynamics of that planet, between the way the winds are going to shift because of the bellows of that world. There's going to be movement of hot to cold and cold to cotton. And so there's going to be a temperate band. There's going to be what I call the crown, which is the name for the band that circles this planet of livable climb. And so I thought, well, that's cool. So now that at least possible. And I thought, well, what is life going to look like? So then I, went and talked to a xenobiologist, the astrophysicist. I asked him, what would live there? So I don't know. Here's a reference to
I'm a physicist.
Talk to him. So I talked to him, and we talked about, what that might look like and how life might evolve. And now my background prior to being a veterinarian was had an undergraduate degree in evolutionary biology. So you'll see a lot of weird animals throughout my books because I like playing in that sandbox. And so working with a xenobiologist, I began sort of constructing what might live there. If the world was normal and then changed, how might things have evolved to fit those new niches? And leaning on my veterinary background helped me sort of get that, my evolutionary background, but also I leaned a little bit on the graphic designer who drew those pictures of those animals. It was Dana Fiddler. She's the one. Dana gets great credit for her beautiful renditions of the creatures, and she also is a bit of a naturalist. She likes to make sure that that the creature I'm proposing to her via description, that it makes sense when she starts to draw it. And so she's like, how does the muscle attachment go from the wing to this, the axis of the humerus? I'm thinking, that's the detail she's bringing up, is she wants to make sure, this is flying, how's it flying? And so she's looking at, where it's living. So she actually challenged me to tweak it and make it even more authentic. So I wanted, I wanted that sense that this is a real creature. I'm not just dropping, an ogre into the middle of a forest
Yeah.
because, that's where ogres live. I wanted
And
to
let's
make
just
sure
stick
that these
wings on
creatures
a
came
cat.
out of the environment. Exactly.
Yeah, no, it doesn't
Always
work that
works.
way.
So
Well, and I love it
I
because
tried to
these
make it
pictures.
I try to make it
Yeah,
as
I was just
authentic as
gonna.
possible.
Yeah, these pictures do look like something out of a naturalist book. They don't read as fantasy. They look like, hey, this is something that is an actual creature that someone was studying them and doing their field sketch notes and seeing how their limbs are and in different positions. And it just brings such a realism, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but it brings a realism to the fantasy and it grounds it in a way that you can go, I actually believe in this world. I believe in the different biospheres because that's one of the things that I loved about the book, that there's definitely a journey that happens here where our main character, I mean, I don't know if you'd say Nyx is the main character. She's the main character for me. So we're going to go with Nyx,
Sure.
who's the one who gets this prophecy. And she goes on this journey, but we go through different ecospheres. So we've got the swampland, and then we're encountering things that live in different kinds of water that you don't want to be in, and things that burrow into bodies that, yeah, some of the stuff got a little intense. But I mean, again, I think one of the things that I really loved about this, and I mentioned before we started, since I listened to the book, you have an intro on there that I really appreciated as a longtime reader of yours, because you, to me, have always been this sci-fi action author that combines the best of that intense pacing of a lot of action novels, but the level of research and reality and nerd love that we get in the sci-fi. It's still here. And it's amazing because you still have the pacing that feels action adventure, but set in a fantasy world. So I love that you didn't lose any of the things that you bring to the sci-fi action, but you brought it to a world that just couldn't exist here, because thankfully we are not locked towards the sunshine, because that would be bad for most of us.
Yes, it would be. Bad sunburns.
But I love that you did that. So I don't know, did the creatures come first? Did those areas that they lived in come first? Which was your process in figuring these things out?
Well, it started out with starting with, can life exist on a tidally locked planet? And then
Yeah.
from there, I looked at what the environment looked like. I'm trying to hedge around because there's some things that are going to be revealed late in the book that you realize. How might geography change if a spinning planet stops spinning?
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean,
what
late in the
might
book,
that look like?
you say something that's almost like the last line in the book that I will not
Pretty
mention.
much, yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
oh.
but I think it's a poorly kept secret. But I think most people sort of know that secret by the time at the end. It's like, of course, that's where they're going,
You gotta get somewhere.
because that's where everybody journeys there at some point in their life, right?
For some reason.
Exactly. Anyways, don't want to give away that ending.
No.
So it started with the planet, the creatures, and then it began. Who's living there? What are they going to look like? Well, how are they thriving? What are the societies looking like? As the course of the saga continues, you're going to see different areas of the crown. You're going to see different political systems, different religious systems that have grown up in this tidally locked planet. So I like looking at the different, casting different light on these different societies, putting them in conflict. So that was a great deal of fun. And then, of course, I had to think about, what's the quest? Who's the main character? Who's going to come to light? And that's when I began, picturing this girl that's for all of her life has been near blind. She can see shadows and light. Everything's the world's a bit murky to her.
Mm-hmm.
If she's obviously in a dark room, she can't see anything. But then, she's the one that has the vision. A blind girl has a vision, sort of appealing to me, and then that began layering and trying to, figuring out how that's going to challenge that character. The book was reviewed by a sensitivity reader for somebody that has sight issues, and so and she added again certain details that being a sighted person, I have a little prejudice in regards to that. And she was like, she should probably think this way when this is happening. So that helped me a lot on trying to build Nyx's character. And so then from there, it just becomes a big roller coaster ride. This book, it's a poorly kept secret that, in my distant past, I wrote under a different pen name, James Clemens, where I wrote 7 fantasy novels under that name. and then James Rollins was writing the sort of action thrillers. Now, when I sold my first book, Subterranean, I thought it was a science fiction novel because
Okay.
it had telepathic marsupial creatures that lived underneath Antarctica. And my editor corrected me and said, "No, Jim, this is not science fiction. This is a thriller because you
Okay.
set it in modern times. There's no way science fiction can be set in modern times." Now I'm thinking
Oh, wait, wait,
that's not
wait.
true. Exactly. My head is that's not even vaguely true. But at
No.
the same time, she's finally going to publish my novel. Somebody
Yeah,
actually
that's when
wants.
you
It's like,
don't quibble about
okay,
it. You just go, all right,
it's a
just tell me where to
thriller.
find my book. So she said it was a
So
thriller simply because of when it was set.
exactly. So that
That's
became
hmm.
James Rollins became the thriller writer. Those that have followed the James Rollins bibliography, there's I tendency to try to ground the story in reality, but by the time you're at
Mhm.
the end, I'm taking you somewhere pretty fantastic and pretty wild. And that's my goal, is to see how much I can convince you by taking you straying off the path and taking you into the wilds to see how much I can get you to believe what's actually happening.
Well, and it's always worked for me. And I think that's part of it is that you start in a very grounded world. And for example, in your book, Amazonia, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. That was one of
Sure.
my
Yep.
favorites. And because it starts in this world where it's like, yes, we know rainforests, and then things go really, really off the rails. No spoilers, go read the book. But again, it's all grounded in that biology. And there's a plausibility there where if you just start going, well, it's magic, you kind of just give up and go, well, of course that wouldn't happen. Magic's not real. But as soon as you say biology, I'm like, this could happen. And I'm still kind of baffled at the fact that telepathic marsupials, that's a thing.
Telepathic marsupial creatures that live
Uh-huh.
2 miles underneath the ice of Antarctica.
Okay.
So
So, I mean, I don't know how
that's
they got there
subterranean.
because marsupials, other than possums, which we have here in the North America, everybody else, they all live over there in Australia. So how they got down there, I don't know. I'm sure you explain it at some point.
Yeah, because
But they're
I did my
telepathic. So
research and found out that they found in Antarctica a bunch of fossils of prehistoric marsupials in Antarctica, because Antarctica at one point was much more temperate, and so
mhm.
as it began to cool, I envisioned this marsupials retreating into
Good
deeper
hell.
and deeper, to try to escape the cold. Where the deeper it got, and there was uh, Antarctica is volcanically active. Mount Erebus is a volcano that's so active in Antarctica, and
So were there
so
pockets of warmth?
I could think there'd be pockets of warmth. If there's
Why not?
tectonic activity and volcanic activity, there probably is some chambers that are heated by magma. And if you're a chilly, shivering marsupial that's trying to escape the changing climate, you might retreat into those warm chambers. And if those chambers closed up, how might life evolve in that enclosed ecosystem? And that became
Telepathically, obviously.
exactly. Well, again, if it's basically most of the, except there's some things that light up in that world, phosphorescent fungus and glowworms and things like that that keep it
Yeah.
alive. Most of it's pretty dark. So if you're in a dark area, you probably would develop some type of maybe echolocation, and
Yeah,
maybe
I was gonna
echolocation
say
online
you buy
turns
a
into something that's
luminesce.
more
Yeah, you buy a
exactly.
luminesce or you echolocate. I didn't realize we could just develop ESP, but I mean, it's your book.
Yeah,
So why not?
exactly.
I love it.
Sure.
Well, it's funny because you have different ways that you're handling this, whether it's so in do I have it right side up? Nope, I have it backwards. In the Starless Crown, we've got a world that's tidally locked, and we've got a different set of evolutionary rules. One of the ones I read just before we interviewed you on Vox Vomitus recently was when reading Altar of Eden, and there that's not exactly natural evolution, but man messing around with things that we probably shouldn't, which we never learned.
Exactly.
We've never learned. And you had one of my most heartbreaking characters, Igor, in there. And you're like, I think you just like to hurt me, honestly, because you did it again with Bashalia in this. Like you just broke me. You repeatedly broke me with that. So I
That's
won't
my
say
goal.
more than that. But everybody who needs to read this needs to be like Bashalia. And I would like a stuffy Bashalia. I don't know if that's possible, if there's merch coming out for
I
me
would
to
I would love that. I'm just
play with smoke.
looking for the, if it gets a movie made, it could be like McDonald tie-in. You get your Happy Meal, get a
My kids will love
plushy
it. Yes.
Bashalia. Yeah. So
Well, it is funny because I always go there because I love reading sci-fi and fantasy. I also love watching it. And to me, my brain went, okay, the nice thing is if we made a movie of this now, we have the CG budget to make this look good. But then my brain goes, no, we don't want CG. We want practical effects. I want like Muppeteers in there, making these things look real, actual fur on these things, build these creatures, because I don't want it to be somebody petting Sean Gunn and
totally agree. I'm totally all for practical effects.
Yes.
CJ is good, but it's still to this day, except for maybe Jurassic Park, it always looks a little bit on the fake side.
That's just because it scares me.
So I'm all for the practical effects.
Yeah, bring it on. Get that practical effect, and then you mix in the CG when you need to, because it's probably hard to make something actually fly. But then you're not necessarily doing the close-up shots and the interactive shots. But that's fine. But it is interesting because you mentioned all these characters who are going on this quest, and we'd have to cast all of them in the movie. And then you get down to, okay, so who is the main character? Because I was joking, Nyx is my main character, and that's who we start with. But we have this band of people coming together. We've got I love the term prince in the cupboard. I'm laughing at that so hard. Who is one of the characters who is the second born prince, even though he's a twin, is he not? You're like, seriously, you just didn't get out the womb first. Sorry, dude, your life could have gone really well if you just managed to get out first. So we've got Camp. And then we've got, again, you have a woman of bronze. And I think one of the things that really stuck with me, and I do read a good amount of fantasy, but I honestly don't read as much epic fantasy as probably a lot of people do, because for me, it ends up feeling very same. They were like, oh, look, here's elves and orcs again. Okay, is it required that when we're doing fantasy, we do that? And you steer clear of that, bringing this whole new mythology. And I guess since it took you 8 years, you had time to come up with all of these
had a few moments
between writing all your other books. I mean, I laugh because it's not like you were sitting there for 10 years just working on this, or 8 years just working on this, because I've read other books that you've written in the meantime, but I guess this one was just kind of simmering in the background. And so here's a random question. You're going between these two pen names. What made you decide to release this one under Rollins instead of Clemens?
Well, it's been a poorly kept secret. Most Clemens readers know I'm actually Rollins.
Yeah.
Most, a fair amount of Rollins readers know I'm Clemens. So Clemens hasn't written anything for almost a decade. So to come out with Clemens it felt weird. I pictured myself going on tour as James Clemens with big signs saying James Clemens. And everybody in the audience knows you're not really James Clemens. You're James Rollins. It felt it was gonna be really weird. Plus, it got confusing to try to juggle two pen names.
I get that.
Again, I revealed prior to this that both of them are pen names, that I've got a third name. So for a while it was schizophrenia because I was doing a fantasy a year, a thriller a year, and practicing as a veterinarian under a different name. So schizophrenia was threatening.
It's just Dr. Jim, because that's just fine. You're always Dr. Jim.
Exactly. That's the way everybody referred to me. That's the way I preferred it. My clients were getting suspicious that something's wrong with Dr. Jim because they realize he's producing books. And there's posters in the lobby. Get your cat spayed. Get a free book.
That is the best promo I've ever seen. Get your cat spayed. Get a free book.
Get a free book.
Please only offer that if you're a licensed veterinarian. If you are not,
that is true.
People be spaying.
I don't want James Patterson trying to spay a cat. So.
No. Stephen King? No. Pet Cemetery, guys. Let's not do that. No.
And I still do some volunteer work. I work with a group that traps feral cats. It's a trap and release program. They bring them to the shelter. I spend one Sunday a month for 8 hours spaying and neutering them. So always, people sometimes refer to me as former veterinarian, and I always sort of rankle a little bit at that because I can still neuter a cat in under 30 seconds, and I'm willing at drop of a hat to prove it.
Are they timing you?
I time myself. How can I go?
And you're an it. Off you go, pretty cat.
I want to be on like America's Got Talent and do I can neuter a cat in under 30 seconds out. I don't think it would play well in Vegas, though.
No, I don't think that's suitable for most audiences. I don't think anybody needs to see that, except for those people who sit there watching like live surgeries or eating popcorn and watching someone's appendix come out. Yeah, that's awesome. You're like, I could do it with a cat. Make sure that cat doesn't reproduce, because spay and neuter, that's how you show your cat your love. And I can do it fast. You just sit there like I'm seeing you with an assembly line of cats just going through, because you don't just do
literally an assembly line. It is an assembly
get all of them. And they're just lined up on stage.
In the 8 hours, we do about between 30 and 40 cats we'll do in those 8 hours. So it's
all those cats are like Did I mean nothing to you?
They're
No.
thrilled.
Now live a good life. Go
Those
cat.
things are like, feral cats are, sometimes I feel like I need like a little whip and like a little chair and trying to control those feral cats because they're just like ferocious.
Just like get them all on catnip and go, come here, kitty, kitty. And then they're all
ketamine
just
works well too.
I was just gonna say, are they just kind of drunk coming in going, this isn't what I signed up for? And then they end up in the bathtub with the ice. What happens? No, that's an urban legend for cats. We don't want those poor cats. We don't want to traumatize them. We just want them to be able to not keep adding to the feral cat population.
Exactly. Plus, there's vectors for diseases. There are little cat factories. There's all good reasons to do that.
Yep, that and all the fleas. And it is funny because I recently read a book that was set in the plague, and I was talking to a friend, and she's like, "Oh, which plague?" I'm like, "Black." She's like, "Oh, it's not my favorite plague." I'm like, "Why do you have a favorite plague?" I'm like, "Was it still the rats and the fleas?" And she said, "Yes." And then the Great Fire of London burned them all out. I'm like, "Yay for the fire!" Like, fire's pretty. That's great. But it all just does show how all these things go together. And honestly, getting back to your book, it does all work together, where you've got a world that creates these creatures and creates these societies and creates people who they then kind of evolve to interact with these. And I hope it's not a big spoiler, but I loved and would love to know how you came up with the idea of bridal song. Can you talk to us about bridal song a little?
Well, it goes into the echolocation of bats. So that's where I started thinking of echolocation of bats and what if somebody engineered bats so that they tweak them to be more like ants and bees, where they have almost a hive type of mentality, and then you tie that with echolocation, so they have this ability maybe to form a greater hive mind. And again, the question is, why would somebody do that? What was the necessity for creating a biological hive mind that's going to last theoretically millennia? And you infuse it into a creature that is poisonous, extremely venomous, very powerful, so that they can survive the crossing of many millennia. And then I thought, well, if this ability was there, what if, because there's interaction between people, and being the veterinarian that I am, I'm always thinking about transfer of diseases from animals to people.
Because that never happens.
COVID, exactly. So I thought, what if this ability began to seep into humans, and they began to, certain individuals, certain bloodlines, began to get some version of that. What might that look like? And that's with bridal song, this ability to combination of echolocation and manipulating other minds through this ability to echolocate.
Yeah, because the whole idea of even bridal, you think of, okay, you're controlling an animal through this, more so necessarily than the echolocation. But I loved how all that worked together of like, oh, well, how did it get from these creatures to these people, and how are they using it? And what if you have people in your background that you don't know have this, and then that's part of you, and how does that work? And the fact that the bats are venomous, okay, silly question for someone who doesn't know as much about bats as she wishes she does. Are any bats venomous in real life?
No. I mean, they carry a lot of nasty stuff in their mouth, but there's nothing that they don't have venom sacs that are going to poison you.
Because even like vampire bats, yes, they feed off blood as opposed to fruit bats, who are just adorable, but they don't transmit anything other than possibly some disease you don't want.
Oh, they do. They actually have hemolytic agents that keep you when they bite you. They keep you from
bleeding out.
Keep your wound from bleeding. So so it's like the clots. They want to keep that font flowing. So they put a hemolytic agent so that you don't clot, and that the wound stays bleeding. So that's a little basis for there could be some, if you manipulate that into something more toxic, you could have a venomous bat. So I'm always looking, how do you, is there a basis in which I can justify, them turning a bat into something venomous? Because there are things in the saliva of bats that do have strange properties.
Strange properties, and there are venomous animals. And I know, like growing up, I only thought, oh yes, snakes are venomous, and okay, some spiders are venomous. And I know it was much later that I'm like, wait a second, I think it's a platypus. Platypus also are venomous, and it's like
exactly. Platypus,
Well, and the first time I saw a platypus in real life, it was probably the same day I was in that silly bat picture, because the San Diego Safari Park has platypus now, and they're so much smaller than I thought. Like, I thought they were like this big, full grown.
Tiny little guys.
Tiny little guy. I'm like, what pictures was I seeing growing up that we were just all drawing platypus just huge just to get us, I don't know, scared of them? I think everybody I know loves them, so I don't think it worked, but still, we have some really messed
But again,
up
just
size
the
proportions.
platypus is a good example of just, evolution gone a little bit of, crazy. We look at the construction of what a platypus is. It's like, if I put that in a book, they go, that's ridiculous. There's no way
Silly,
that a creature like that
made
could
that
exist.
up.
So I can't even put a platypus in Starless Crown because I just don't think I could convince enough people that such a creature could exist.
No, sorry, monotremes, you're not allowed to
And
exist.
it's venomous.
Yes. Just you got your monotremes, and they're too weird. You got to stick with at least your marsupials, and then they are allowed to be, well, clairvoyant, obviously.
Exactly.
Or at least be able to do that. Oh, and Jennifer Ann Gordon says a platypus would never be believable, and that's
exactly.
I mean she's right. You can't have a she didn't know they were venomous either. And yes, they are venomous, and it's one of those things. I think it's only the males, and it's in like their feet. It's kind of weird.
Yep.
But it's one of those things where you just have to go, none of this makes a lot of sense, and sometimes evolution just does weird stuff. It's part of the reason I'm obsessed with octopus, because they don't make any sense from most evolutionary points of view, which is why it's like, this is just cool. How'd that happen? We don't know. It's all good. But most of the animals that you created in here, I love that you have the drawings in here so we can actually get a visualization. I was just on my own until I went back and looked at the book and went, oh, there's pictures. And I can look at them and be able to really know, hey, here are these things that are just chasing people down, or maybe growling at people, but maybe nice pets, kind of, sort of, a little bit. You broke me on a couple of those too. I won't say which.
Yeah,
ones,
I mean, obviously
broke
some
my heart.
horrible creatures in the book, but I also wanted to, ones that are bonded, that have a relationship with whether it's Gramble Book with Nyx, or whether it's Cauldron and Aemon with Graylin. Again, it's that veterinarian side, the side of the brain that loves animals, loves medicine, loves science, sort of seeps into the side that's more crazy, telling weird stories.
Yeah.
And it happened inadvertently, actually. Is that, there's that old adage, writers are naked on the page. You expose more about yourself than you think you're exposing them. And I thought, that's poppycock. Until I got an email from a gentleman who said, Jim, I'm enjoying your books, but why, like right here in your series of novels, every one of your main characters seem to have an animal sidekick. Whether it's a military war dog, whether it's a orphan jaguar cub, or this guy has, there's the sign language speaking gorilla. And I realized that when I sold my practice and stopped practicing full time, these animals began appearing in my novel, because I wasn't getting satisfaction anymore from, except for Altar of Eden, that has a veterinarian as a lead character. None of my other books do. And I get questioned, well, why don't you write a book about a veterinarian? I thought, well, my day job was being a veterinarian. When I write, I want to escape. I want to go somewhere different. And so when the early novels, because I was still practicing, there wasn't that a lot of animals that were appearing in the novels. But once I stopped practicing, all of a sudden, and it wasn't a conscious decision, of just because I missed my daily, animal infusion, began appearing in my books. They began joining me on this adventure. So it's a little disconcerting that gentleman could sort of, get a little bit of my
you didn't
psyche
even know.
Exactly. He's right. Why did I start doing that? Well, that's when I sold the clinic.
Like, and they just all started appearing, like Noah's Ark showing up in your book, which makes me go, okay, don't ever get like a beta fish or a hamster on your desk, because I want the animals to keep showing up, because it's one of the things I love that makes you kind of distinctly you in your books, is this crossover, and I love it so much. So I'm hoping.
Yeah, even in my next Sigma novel that comes out next in April, Kingdom of Bones, I describe it as sort of if I took Sigma characters and I dropped them in the middle of Amazonia, and I required Tucker and his military war dog Kane to pull their butts out of the fire. That's pretty much Kingdom of Bones.
Okay,
so
I'm not sure.
A lot of weird animals, a lot of weird biology, a lot of strange animals in the Congo that you're going to discover in that novel.
I'm already worried for the dog going to the Amazonia, because I know what happened in Amazonia, and I'm just like, don't send the dog there. Maybe it's a sheltered dog with, I'm picturing with maybe armadillo kind of plates to protect it. Is that a thing? I mean, it's not evolutionary thing. I mean, just actual maybe plastic ones, or Kevlar. Can we give like Kevlar armadillo plates on the dog?
Yeah, Kane
Just
has
worried.
Kevlar armor, so he's pretty well protected.
I want him again a ball.
I'm not gonna just yeah. That book will make people cry too.
Yeah, well, you like to do that. You like to mess with our emotions, but that's your job now. Instead of 30 cats spayed in a minute. Wait, that's not quite right. 1 cat spayed in 30 seconds. That's better than 30 in a minute. I'm not great with numbers, but you can play with our emotions. And again, I think one of the things for people who are like, oh, I love epic fantasy, this book is for you. But if you're someone who goes, I don't really like epic fantasy because it takes forever for anything to happen, this book is still for you because you didn't leave behind any of that pacing, which so much happens in this, it would be impossible to summarize it. So everyone's just going to have to go read it. And I wouldn't want to summarize it anyway. But when you've got these crazy storylines coming together with a bronze person, and I mean actually bronze, I did consider, because sometimes I like to get into the theme of whoever I'm talking to. I thought about getting a really bad spray tan and just being like as bronze as possible. But I think even a bad spray tan would never convey as bronze, like the metal, not just, oh, look, I have nice bronze skin. Like I don't know, someplace tropical, someplace more tropical than Orange, California, which is gray outside right now. I've got my artificial light because there's no sun today. Oh. Maybe I should just go to Amazonia. That will help.
There you go.
I'm going.
Perfect.
Well, Dr. Jim, thank you so much for joining me today. Everybody,
thank you, Allison.
Go read this. Go listen to it. It's amazing. You want to be caught up before the next book comes out. He's got 3 more coming, so you need to stay on top of this. He's not going to make us wait 20 years. I know you won't. You are way too prolific for that. Thank you. And everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you're watching this live, thank you so much. If you're watching the replay, awesome. If you are watching it on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. I would love for you to join me again on March 15th when I have Nick Jones, author of The Observer Effect. And in the meantime, enjoy reading. Thanks, and talk to you later. Bye.